Hey, it's America's Supermom. Thank you for joining me on my podcast. This series is the Corona Chronicles. I created this so that we would have an outlet of positivity in the midst of a lot of negativity. You know what I'm talking about. All the news, the fear around this virus, how it can affect us, what the new normal is looking like, and how so many things have changed that a lot of people feel like um, it is the end of the world, so to speak. So, this podcast was created so that those of us who have hope, who are willing to move forward with this new normal and innovate new things that will help us to be creative and positive. That is what this platform is for us to come together and share that positivity and that light with those who may need it. So if you're interested in sharing your insight, please reach out because we can never have enough positive news. So sit back and enjoy the show.
I want to thank you guys for joining me today. I'm really excited about my next guest, Luis Gonzalez. We were able to get connected through Elaine, who is a mutual friend of ours, Elaine Jacques, and really excited to have a conversation with Luis today. We have been together on a Zoom call, and so just really able to connect and see different things that we have in common in terms of mindset and just being able to pivot and move forward in a positive way in lieu of, just the current landscape of the current events with everything with this pandemic to racial injustice, just a number of things that were like a breath of fresh air being able to communicate and exchange a very interesting dialogue over some of these topics. So I'm excited to have him with me today. And at this time, I'm going to give him the opportunity to introduce himself before we dive into the interview.
Thank you, Lachelle. It's a pleasure to be here. As you mentioned, I'm Luis, and I'm speaking to you from San Diego, California. I'm a second generation Mexican American of my grandparents walked across the border from Mexico and began to pick all the fruits and vegetables that are grown here. And you've probably heard similar stories. Here we are. So I'm the second generation here, born and raised in California. And I've traveled the world, lived a lot of places. The majority of my youth were spent, as you and I had discussed, in Compton, California, which gave me I'm very thankful for the background that I grew up in. And traveled around the world, lived around the world, Mexico, Brazil, and India in particular. India happens to be one of my favorite places. And I've worked for some high-end organizations professionally, Microsoft, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, Marriott Hotels, and some others. And I don't know how to sum it up, but on the human side of things, I'm just, dedicated to just being the best person I can be. And sometimes I fail myself and I pick myself back up and keep going. So that's kind of a brief summary of me.
Yes, awesome. And I think one of the things that really intrigued me about our first conversation is the array of combinations that you have within your immediate family in terms of culture, and this is so shocking because so many of us look at people and we just assume that we can just write their own script, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We look at them and it's like, oh, okay, you're second generation Mexican American. All right, and think we know the story, but tell everybody a little bit of insight about, what your family dynamic is like.
Yeah, sure. Key word you used, assumption. And when we don't know the whole story, we make up stories to fill in the blank. So that happens all the time. But as I mentioned, from a Mexican American background, now my father's Mexican American, my mother's Caucasian. So I'm half. Without going into too much detail, there's not much to say on my mother's side of the family because she was basically disowned back in those days when she married my dad, who was Mexican American. My grandfather on my mother's side didn't believe in mixed marriages. So I come from a biracial, I guess you could say, background. And I was raised in a city called Compton, California, which in my early childhood was just a typical average, I don't know, everyday kind of suburban neighborhood. Things changed pretty dramatically in the 60s. And in that time period, my parents got divorced and both of my parents remarried African-American spouses. So my mother, who's Caucasian, married an African-American man who I called dad, who basically raised me from the time I was 5 till the time I left the house at 18 as my stepfather. My father, who I also called dad and is very close with, married an African-American woman. So bring it up to speed to this day, the current time period we're in and all that. It's just, to me, I'm very grateful that I have the background I do growing up in a multicultural environment, having a Spanish last name and mostly identifying as a Mexican American. My looks, however, aren't the typical, whatever that means, typical Mexican look. I don't know, people have called me Italian, Greek, Persian. I look Mediterranean, I guess. So people are, there's that assumption. People will assume what I am. And growing up in Compton, as the demographics changed from predominantly white to mostly black with a lot of Latino, then this whole question of identity came into play, and what was I, and what did people identify me as, and how was I compartmentalized? But one thing I think we discussed in our previous discussion was I'm very thankful for both of my parents who instilled in me and my brothers and sisters that at the end of the day, it boils down to human connection and how people treat you, not what their skin color is. And having grown up in an environment that was multiracial, multicultural, I don't want to say I was colorblind because I wasn't. And of course, we were aware of things. But gosh, as a kid growing up in a mixed neighborhood, it was just all fun and games and harmonious. And it takes a village. All of our parents were parents of all of us and all of that. And so when we come into what's happening now, into the conversation on the stage in the United States here anyway, regarding race, I have an interesting perspective and experiences. And again, I'm just really thankful that I was raised the way I was in the environment that I was, because it helps me navigate, I think, the conversations that are taking place right now that for some people are very difficult.
So true. Now, so what do you think in terms of the way you grew up? You just say a typical neighborhood,
Right.
You weren't colorblind. You did notice different color, but what do you think maybe changed in terms of the way you were raised with that village mentality and all that makes it a little bit different for some people today to kind of embrace our differences?
I don't know. I don't know exactly what has changed. And to go back to that time period, even though, in my, let's say, 8-year-old, 9, 10-year-old mind, it might have been, from my perspective, harmonious and no issues and all that. But, when you look back historically, white flight was happening and there was a lot of racial tension in the world at that time in 1968 and 69, or at least in the United States. So what has changed?
Right.
What has changed? I can't really say. I don't know what has changed. That's a really good question. All I know is that the values that those, I'll call them the parents, the Latino parents, the black parents, the white parents, and anyone else that I can think of, we all shared the same values. And I don't know if the values have changed 40, 50 years later, perhaps by society at large. I don't know. That's a good question. And I don't know, Lachelle, if I can even answer that. What changes have taken place? The way I describe it to my nieces and my nephews who are in their early to mid 20s, when they ask me, what was it like, back then in the 60s and the 70s, growing up in Compton and, only having 5 television channels and, telephones hanging on the kitchen wall. What was it like? The best way I describe it is and this is just my context. This is my perspective. Someone may completely disagree with me. They may have had a different experience, but it just seemed like things were happier and nicer and more polite back then. And it seems like now things are louder, angrier, faster, in your face. I don't know if that makes any sense the way I'm describing it.
Definitely, because that's what I remember growing up.
You know what I mean?
You know?
Things were nicer,
Yeah.
politer, things weren't so fast, and now it's like, whoa. So that is a change, I think, that may, I think that's one. But yeah.
And it, it's really hard because, it's like you have the lens of maturity that just happens over time. As you get older, you begin to realize different things. But like you said, really reflecting and going back, it's like, things were just simple. It was, if you didn't have it, I mean, I would tell my kids, like, when I would go visit my grandmother for the summers, we would go to the neighbors and borrow eggs, cups of milk.
Yeah, we did that. Yeah, we did that too. And then you pay it back or you give them something. Yes.
Exactly. So it's like, it would be crazy for somebody to come over to you and knock on the door. Hey, can I have a cup of milk, or a cup of sugar? But that was just like normal stuff back then, right?
Or even other stuff that I think of as a kid. Let's say I'm at a friend's house playing and the streetlights come on. It's getting dark. That mom would say, does your mother know where you are? Don't you need to get home? Or she might even call my mom and say, Louis over here. There was that village mentality. And again, this is across all different racial lines, everything. We were the neighborhood.
Yes.
Oh, we did.
Yeah. So true. Yeah. It was like nobody needed an alarm clock. When those street lights went on, you better be going home.
All the kids knew. All kids knew that. And even to the point, this is another change, and I'm not going to say it's right or wrong, but I just even remember that we weren't allowed to call our neighbor, like my friends who were my neighbors, their parents. Everybody went by Mr. and Mrs. We didn't call any of our friends'
Absolutely.
parents. I would have gotten smacked probably if my mom heard me call, one of our neighbor parents by a first name. It's just more respect, I guess. I don't know.
So true. Yes. And, that's what's so funny because, for me as a kid, it's like, wow, we have a lot of family members because, if you don't say Mr. or Mrs., it would be aunt or uncle, some kind of way of respect. And so, I totally get that. As the same for me, too. Now, so switching gears, you're traveling the world, and working with these high-end organizations and the desire to be the best person that you can be. What do you think kind of happened? Or is it the result of maybe this traveling the world that has made you more conscious of being the best person that you
That's a great question, Lachelle. I appreciate that. I would say let me just go way back. I went to Catholic school all my life. So I guess since a very early childhood, I had something instilled in me that to this day, I'll just say I'm not an atheist. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of what I believe and don't believe in all of that, but let's just say that since a very early age, I've always believed that there's a purpose. This just didn't happen. This just didn't come out of thin air. There had to be some bigger plan to this. And I don't know what that is, but I've always had that in my mind. As I got to be 18 and I graduated from Catholic school, I've always been a risk taker, explorer. What are other people thinking? Been very curious. And I started to question a lot of things. And through the questioning and through the reading of books and exploring other paths and philosophies, et cetera, probably around age 21 or 22, I guess I just came to the realization that this is for me. This is personally speaking for me. Again, someone else may have a different perspective. For me, life is just immaterial. It's just short, it's quick, and there's something deeper that matters, and I'm onto it. I don't know what it is. I can't explain it or put it into words, but I just know there's something deeper, and I want to be tapped into that. I want to be tuned into that. And then when I kind of came to that realization, it wasn't a decision. It wasn't a conclusion. It was like an aha moment, a realization. And another realization I had was, okay, with that came clarity about, I guess, more clarity about where my faults were. I was examining my life, where I was, from where I had come and where was I headed. And I think I've always been kind of a softie at heart. I've always been a very empathetic person. I'm kind of an empath. I tend to feel people's feelings. And so I started to reflect on myself. Where had I hurt people's feelings? Where had I had that sharp tongue that I thought I was being funny or sarcastic as a 19-year-old? But man, I hurt somebody's feelings. And I started looking at all that. And then the next thing you know, I met someone who handed me a book, was all about self-improvement. This is when I was 22. I think it was called The Road Less Traveled. And I got into that. Yes.
Oh,
I got
Wayne
into
Dyer.
that book. I think it was Wayne Dyer. Yeah, it was in the 80s. And I got into that book and I went, I'm on this road and it's less traveled. But you know what? I have no other option. And here I am, how many years later, still working on myself. So I hope that answered the question.
Yes. I mean, and so, because see, a lot of people, there is some dramatic but subtle changes that happen as a result of going on this journey of personal reflection. And so a lot of people hear about it, and for some of the listeners, they're like, yeah, I've heard that before, but I just don't know how I start. What maybe was something that prompted you to kind of dig a little deeper? Because at first it's like, well, society says we need to graduate from college, we need to get a good job, we need to do all the things and check all the boxes. And when we go on that journey, there's something else, like you said, something deeper. So what does that look like? What was it that happened? Were you noticing different things in your daily routine that kind of gave you that tap on the
Sure,
shoulder?
I'll get very real and personal with you, and I'll answer that question. I have questioned reality all my life since I was a teenager, probably 12 or 13 in Catholic school. I started exploring other religions just to see what was up. And then to get personal with you, I had to deal with my sexuality. Turns out I was a gay kid who didn't even know he was gay, trying to wrestle with blossoming sexual, or not sexual urges, but when you're a teenager, you know what happens, right? How do I deal with this? What is going on? And I go to Catholic school. They're telling me I'm going to burn in hell forever for thinking this. So I began to question at a very early age. Wait a minute. Okay, this is not a choice that I made. This is something that's like kind of how I'm hardwired. The more I prayed, the more it didn't go away. And so I began to say, whoa, hold on a second. You're telling me God is love, but yet he's going to send me to an eternal hellfire because of something I didn't choose or ask for? No, I don't think so. And then I just started questioning more and more, like, okay, wait a minute. Society's telling me I'm supposed to get married. I'm supposed to have kids. I'm supposed to get a job. I'm supposed to be part of the big machine. I'm supposed to put my hand over my heart by this flag. What the hell does this flag mean anyway? What is this country anyway? And it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And here's the conclusion I came to. And this is, I won't go into how I came to the conclusion. It was a realization or a conclusion, what have you. But the only thing that mattered to me was love. And I don't mean romantic love. I mean, however you want to describe it, brotherly love, sisterly love, universal love, oneness love, whatever you want to call it, that higher transcendent love. That's all that mattered. And I wanted to do everything I could to manifest that. And that means I had a lot of work to do, which brings us to where we are today. I'm still asking myself all the time, is this getting me closer to love? Is what I said, is that bringing me closer to love? And when I'm thinking, is that bringing me closer to love? No, you've got fear here. You didn't say what you really meant. Or no, you've got fear of whatever it is, and you thought you'd be funny and say something sarcastic. You hurt someone's feelings. Or you flat out lied because you wanted something, or who knows what it is. And that's been my compass, I guess you could say. So that's kind of, I hope that answered the question. That's kind of how it happened.
I appreciate that, because I think, a lot of people struggle with, have you read the book?
You mentioned it, and I did. Yes. I can't say I've read it, but I've peeked into it, and I'm interested to know more. Yes.
Okay.
I'm familiar.
So, I think a lot of things as, okay.
Yes, I am.
Okay, something happened. It just came up here. This
Mhm.
technology.
Uh,
Gotta love it.
I hear you loud.
But yeah, so with that, it's like we have society like dictates what our life is supposed to look
Yeah.
like. And it's kind of like this internal struggle between, okay, I'm feeling a different way, but society is saying I should be this
Yes.
way. And that courage to step away from the expectation.
Yeah.
What was it you think that really got you to make that pivot? Because so many people are struggling, even now, we're like doing everything on the outside, wearing these masks and thinking that we are hiding this situation from other people, but inside we're just kind of like gradually allowing ourselves to die because that voice is telling us something different. We're not allowing it
Yep.
to come out.
Well, I'll answer that question. I want to share a little more background, mentioning that I come from a Mexican-American background. My grandfather, my dad's dad, the one who walked across the border back in the day when you could do that, grandfather was named Luis, like me. My dad is named Luis. So this is a tradition that Latin Americans have. You name your kid after the dad and the grandfather, and it goes on. And I was the firstborn male of the firstborn male. So there's, culturally speaking, in a Mexican culture, Latin American culture, a lot of responsibility comes with being the firstborn male, especially if you're carrying the family name. So my grandfather sat me down at a very young age, probably 8 or 9, and told me, I kid you not, don't make the same mistake your father did by marrying a white woman. Marry a Mexican woman like your father should have. She won't divorce you. And then you're going to name your first child Luis, because you got to keep that going on. You were named Luis after me, and so was your dad. So you got to keep that going on. And so I was fed, if you will, the cultural norms and the expectations, right? Oh, that was all fine until I got to be about 13 or 14, as I mentioned. And then it became a burden. And by the time I graduated from high school and I got to be about 21, I think my grandfather, in his wisdom, saw or read between the lines. I don't know what he saw or read, but he pulled me aside one time and told me, I don't like what you're becoming. I don't like you, but I love you because you're my grandson. Now go get me a cup of coffee. And he died a couple of years after that. I have to say, I loved my grandfather a lot. He was a big influence in my life, and I have a lot of love for him. But when he died, I was freed up. I didn't have that guilt. I didn't have that expectation to not disappoint him and marry and name my first kid Luis and set the bloodline straight and all that. And that's when I started traveling. My first trip to India was when I was 22. I left by myself. And I think now that I look back, I wouldn't call it an escape in the terms of running away from something, but I would call it an escape, but more in terms of getting out of my current environment that I can't see out of, so that I can clear my head out and figure kind of out where my head's at, if that makes any sense. So I went to India for about 4 months.
Yeah.
Went to India for 4 months and came back and, kind of was on my path, if you will. Like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I do. And I've been doing that ever since. Yeah, some people don't like it. Some people applaud it and everything else in between. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. Awesome, because I think, these are some of the things that people really have questions about, but we go to sleep. It keeps us up at night. It wakes us up in the middle of the night. These questions and thoughts that we have that we try to mask and not actually face head on.
Yep.
So I think that's remarkable, to be able to have that. So what is it that you do now, maybe in your daily routine, that allows you the capacity to be your full self and reach your potential? Because it takes a practice. I know with me, I can't compare the same with me having depression, but it just plagued me for 13 years. And it's a constant work that I have to do to create the environment for me to thrive instead of just survive. So what are some things that you do to kind of keep you in that mindset moving forward, not having a level of clarity that allows you to be able to discern what's important to you?
Another great question, Lachelle, man. I will admit, or I will agree with you. I think you said I forgot how you said it. It's either it's work or it takes practice or something to that effect. And yes, that is the case with me. So with my trip to India way back then that I just told you about, I visited India many times since then. I lived there and I got very much into meditation. So first and foremost, since I was 22, probably 23, I've had a practice of meditation. Now, there have been periods in the last 35 years where maybe I went months without it and then got back into it. You know, there were ebbs and flows, shall we say. But I would say in the last 10 years, I think maybe, you know how it is when you get older, your priorities shift. You look at life a little differently and things maybe slow down a little bit, at least for me. And I realized, you know, my days are numbered. I mean, let's be real. We only have a certain amount of time here on the planet. And if I'm focused on things that aren't really important in terms of long term, where's my consciousness at? Where's my heart at? What is my state of mind going to be like when I die, if I die, in the moment when that moment comes? And then that's when I realized, okay, I've got to dedicate. It can't just be, oh yeah, I meditate for 10 minutes a day. No, I've got to really focus on it. I've got to make time for it. I've got to schedule it. So Lachelle, that's one component. Let's just say meditation. And that could be sometimes praying. It could be sometimes just sitting and being still. The typical idea of what people get in their mind when I say meditation. Could be singing. It could be any of that. Then there's also reading self-help books. I have certain authors, speakers, gurus, if you will, that resonate with me. And it's not always 100%, but I'll take the 90% and leave the 10. And I surround myself with that kind of stuff to keep me going, to keep me positive. And again, it takes work. And I'll give you a perfect example. It happened yesterday. Yesterday was one of the days. I don't know what happened yesterday. I don't know what it was, but yesterday I didn't feel like it. I didn't feel like sitting and meditate. I wanted to sit down and turn the TV and watch something on YouTube, and then I wanted to eat some spaghetti. I just didn't feel like meditating. And then I had to have a talk with myself, which I do. I said to myself, okay, you're complaining that you don't want to sit for 20 minutes. Some people don't even have the luxury to do that, the ability to do, the facility to do that. You've been taught how to do it. People have taken time to show you, and you know, just like going to the gym, you're going to feel better when you do. So I had that little talk with myself, and I sat down last night. And of course, afterwards, I'm like, man, I'm so glad I did that. I'm grounded. My confusing thoughts have settled. I have an action plan for tomorrow. And if it all blows up today, it won't matter because I'm feeling good right now in my own self and my own satisfaction. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And, you know, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. So much truth to like going to the gym or, you know, doing these practices that, you know, we just get in our own way about ego, thinking we are stronger, smarter, whatever, you know, when we are able to be that way because of the disciplines that we practice. That's right. And the minute we kind of feel like we're strong, we leave those disciplines and think we can go do it on our own. You know, it's like not knowing how to swim. And you have on a life jacket, and then you've been keeping this life jacket on, and then it's like, hey, I can do this. Take off the life jacket.
Yeah, right. Right. You know it.
So I totally get that. And I just love the fact that, you know, we do go back and forth with this mindset that, you know, we feel like we're strong enough to overcome these parameters or guardrails or boundaries that we set up for ourselves, and they're designed to help us be successful.
Yeah.
You know, so I really get that and resonate with that. So if somebody wants to get started with meditation, because this is a popular thing that a lot of people talk about, what suggestion would you give them, you know, in order to started, or what type of process should someone follow to kind of incorporate that in their daily routine?
Well, I don't want to point any particular group or religion or teacher or anything like that out to anybody, but I'll just share from my experience how it worked for me and how I've heard other people describe it for them. First of all, for a lot of people, including me, especially in the early days, very, very difficult to sit and still one's mind. Try that. It's so difficult, right? So that kind of meditation can often frustrate people, and then they give up because it's just so hard to do. They sit for 5 minutes and their minds are racing and they can't still it. And so that's difficult for some people. What I started with was chanting. So for me, not the easy, but what worked for me was chanting, which is basically singing the names of God in repetition, whatever names you claim. Now, my came from India, so it was an Indian chant, and I began to chant, and then I liked it, and it stilled my mind, and I was focusing on what I perceived as God, and it worked, and I've been doing it ever since. And then later, that's when I started to realize, okay, you just need to try what you can to discipline yourself to still the mind, because even sometimes I just want to be still. I just want to be still. And the busier I got with work and with travel and all of that, the more it became an imperative that at the end of the day, it's like, I don't want anything. I don't want any noise. I don't want TV. I don't want music. I need to sit and be still. And once I got to that point and I started, I guess, looking at YouTube videos and reading up on actual meditation practices and ways to start out, then I just set myself a time and I just said, just meditate for 5 minutes. 5 minutes became 10, 10 became 15, and became 20. So in order to suggest to someone where they might start, where they might begin, I would say start there. If your mind is able to be still and you want to practice just sitting and breathing, watching your breath, and letting the thoughts just flow through you without holding on to them and running with them, try that. I would also recommend just doing some exploration, perhaps on YouTube or on the internet, to try. There's so many practices out there, and I don't think that there's a one size fits all. And personally, I don't believe there's only one right way, one right path to God or self-realization or whatever it is. So I would start there. I would start seeing if you can sit and breathe and watch your breath. And if you're very, very restless, then look into chanting, or what they call mantra, mantra, mantra meditation.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, I think this is so key and important. Yeah, because so many people, right now it is a time to get yourself still, for whatever that looks like, because so many people are in rapid transition, be it the industry you're in or families changing, a lot of things that you're used to happening, even just the mourning process of a typical funeral, everything.
It's
now,
different.
You may, look at this home going, actually being side by side with your loved ones. So many things we have to consider that, meditation can be a powerful. So I have just really enjoyed this that you have with the audience. What is the best way for the audience to get a hold of you?
Best way to get a hold of me would be probably through my LinkedIn profile. I don't know if many people have a LinkedIn profile, your listening audience, but it's linkedin.com/Luis Gonzales with an S on the end, LuisGonzales. And I need we can start the conversation there. I'm not very active on Facebook. I would say I'm sorry, I'm not, but I'm not very active on Facebook.
Hey, but you know what? That's probably one of the things. That's probably something that keeps you a little bit more sane, okay? Because I'm telling you, once you get on this platform, then you get on that one, and that one. It's like half your day is just doing posts on these platforms. You know what
Right,
I
and it's
mean?
a rabbit hole. One click leads to the next, and the next thing you know, you're trying to get out. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, LinkedIn would be the best way. That's where I established my network. Even though it's a professional site, it's good to just make
Hmm.
human connections there as well. We can talk about all kinds of stuff and make connections on things other than business.
Absolutely. Okay. And then what final words would you like to share with the audience?
Wow, final words. Wow, this is a good one. Listen to your heart. The answers are there. That just came to me now
Hmm.
because that's what works for me. When I get too much in my head and things are going on and I need to move left or right or make decisions or any of that, after a while I have to shut off the brain and I have to go deep in my heart, and the answer lies there. So that's my last word to anybody. At the end of the day, it's all about the heart.
So good. I love that. And I appreciate, again, everything that you have shared with the audience and great words of wisdom. And looking forward to us collaborating again in the future.
I appreciate it, Lachelle. It was a pleasure, and thank you for having me on your show. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, you are so welcome. And I'll be in touch soon, okay?
That sounds good. Thank you, Lachelle. Have a good rest
All
of the
right.
evening.
You, you're welcome. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you for joining me on this episode. I really enjoy providing content that inspires and challenges us to be a better version of ourselves. If you are interested in being a guest on the show, please email me at info@lachelleatkins.com. You can also reach out to me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, or my YouTube channel. If there was something in this episode that resonated with you, it probably will resonate with someone else. So please share it. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. But those aha moments, those moments of really getting something and changing your perspective are very, very pivotal in having people change the trajectory of their lives. And so being able to share insightful information so that other people can grow is the easiest thing that we can do as we pay it forward. So again, I want to thank you all for listening. And if you have time, write out a review. Go to iTunes, Anchor, wherever you can find this podcast on any of those platforms, and write a review about what impact this episode had on you, what you learned, or whatever. Any feedback is great because it just helps me to understand what content is really beneficial for those that are listening. So again, I want to thank you all for your support and taking the time to spend some time with me and my guests. And I wish you a wonderful day. Thanks for listening.